What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 10th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another weekend of who knows what the heck they're going to do now. It really is a very, very, very crazy time here. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big news today continues to be the firing of FBI Director James Comey. A lot of people are very happy about it. A lot of people are very unhappy about it. And it is proving to be a litmus test of those who were caught up in the Clinton scandals, the Clinton Foundation, everything else, because they're on the warpath here right now. And the firing was not handled perhaps as elegantly and diplomatically as it should have been. Apparently, a message was delivered to FBI headquarters and then released to the media, and FBI headquarters was not able to get the message to James Comey, who was out in Los Angeles speaking to a room full of FBI recruits, and he found out about it because there were TV monitors in the back of the room where he was talking, showing the news feed, and it came on up, Trump fires Comey. Apparently, he thought somebody was trying to play a trick on him. So what we have right now, the Democrats are just up in arms. Oh, this can't be allowed to happen. We've got to have hearings. We've got to have whatever. And they're raising on a busted flush here because the president nominates the FBI director, the Senate confirms, and after that, the director of the FBI serves within the Department of Justice under the Attorney General and can also report to the Director of National Intelligence. Now, the president can also fire the FBI director even without having a stated reason. There are no statutory considerations, or conditions rather, on the president's authority to remove the FBI director. The director is an at-will employee, serving at the will of the president, and when the president says, I don't want this person, they're gone, there's no argument there. Remember when Bill Clinton fired the FBI director the day before they found Vince Foster's body? Nobody kicked up a ruckus then. But a lot of people are out there saying this is a very positive sign that we may finally be getting the Donald Trump that we voted for. Too soon to say that definitively, in my opinion, but obviously a very positive sign here. Over at governmentslaves.info, they're saying the firing of James Comey is a great first step, but now it's time to start indicting him on corruption charges and obstruction charges for what he was doing to the Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin investigations. He was clearly obstructing. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is saying Comey has repeatedly and improperly protected Clinton and her top people from consequences of their obviously criminal behavior. Remember in that press conference, Comey went on down the list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton and then gave her a get-out-of-jail-free card by saying she didn't intend to do wrong. Except if you read Title 18, intent is not required. Negligence, carelessness. It is the act of exposing classified documents in an insecure environment that carries a jail sentence penalty of up to 10 years. So what are the Democrats doing? Well, they're already out there. Well, the firing of Comey was to end the investigation into the link between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. This proves Russian collusion. And they're already out there and they're saying it's Russia, Nixon, it's Watergate, it's Russia, it's all over again. They're just screaming this is all about the Russian narrative because they're all starting to understand something very, very critical. And that is Comey is not there to shield the Clinton-Bush duocracy and all of their enablers, and there's a lot of them. And what's really interesting is to watch the flip-flops going on. Now remember when Donald Trump launched those 59 cruise missiles into Syria, only 23 of which actually hit the target, and all of a sudden John McCain was fully on board with Donald Trump. Yes, Trump is being decisive, he's being presidential, and now all of a sudden he's back to saying, oh no, Trump is working with Russia, this is a horrible thing. We need a special prosecutor to investigate the Russian-Trump collusion, and obviously blah, 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 blah. Now, what's really interesting, if you go on back and you search through the Internet, you will find all these clips of Democrats who wanted Comey out back when he was investigating Hillary's email server and the Clinton Foundation. And it was Chuck Schumer was out there saying Comey had to go. MSNBC, 10 days before the election, Comey must go. Bernie Sanders, he must step down. Harry Reid, Comey should be investigated. They were just on the warpath against him. James Carville, Tim Kaine, Maxine Waters, they were all out for Comey's blood. Barbara Boxer, Keith Olbermann, John Podesta. And now all of a sudden they're his staunchest defenders. Oh, they can't fire James Comey. And it is really ridiculous to see all of this stuff coming on down. Just the hysterical about face here. Especially Chuck Schumer. This was back in November of last year, just days before the election. Chuck Schumer. I do not have confidence in him, meaning Comey, any longer. To restore my faith, I'm going to have to sit down and talk to him and get an explanation for why he did this. And he's talking about the reopening of the investigation into Hillary's email server. But remember, Comey's hand was forced by the New York Police Department. Now, Stephen Colbert, who's already under fire for his inappropriate reference to Donald Trump's mouth and Vladimir Putin's nether regions, basically broke the news that Comey was fired to his show audience, and they cheered. They all thought it was a great thing. And then when Colbert says, no, this is going to help Trump and the Russians, they all booed him. Everybody knows what's really going on. The cover stories just are not holding. And you need to remember all the things Comey did wrong while he was in charge of the FBI. They actually had Tamerlan Tsarnaev under surveillance and then let him go. Or maybe he was working for them at the Boston bombing. FBI was exposed conducting its own data mining on innocent American citizens. And just all of these horrible, horrible things that he did. Now, interestingly enough, remember back during the email investigation, Comey granted blanket immunity to Hillary's entire campaign staff on the excuse it was the only way to acquire a laptop they wanted to examine, which is ridiculous. All it takes is a subpoena. You will surrender the laptop. But Comey just gave a blanket immunity to everybody against any kind of prosecution. So there was something funny going on, and maybe now we will get to the bottom of it. Now, according to a former U.S. attorney, DeGenova, Comey's hand was forced by FBI rank and file, who were just seething in anger at the botched or blocked Hillary email investigation. And already the FBI is trying to pull back and say, well, the reason Comey was fired was he exaggerated the number of emails that were found on Anthony Weiner's laptop. No, that was not an exaggeration. If you go back to when that story first broke late last year, they found 650,000 State Department emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. And the Department of Justice, still then under Loretta Lynch, blocked an investigation into the Clinton Foundation for all the pay-for-play allegations that were surfacing in these emails. And those angry FBI agents may be the loose cannon on deck, because I'm seeing this story, this came out of Disobedient Media. Sources are claiming that the Comey firing could result in a release of documents, new leaks from within the FBI, and it opens the door to a new Clinton probe. Because Comey saying, I'm not going to prosecute or recommend prosecution, and Loretta Lynch saying, we're not going to prosecute, does not get Hillary off the hook. She can still be charged. And I imagine over at Hillary's digs, the ashtrays are bouncing off the walls even now. Which gets us on back to an issue I am going to raise again. And I'm going to start pounding on this again because it's important. Back in 1994, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, there was a scandal called Chinagate. And how it worked was that Bill Clinton, using his authority as president, authorized the transfer to China of highly sensitive technology with potentially military application, technology that had previously been banned for export to China, over the objection of the intelligence community and the Defense Department. And at the same time, Chinese money was pouring into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign. Now, it was being funneled through Chinese-American citizens to make it look like it was all legal and above board. But the investigation showed the money was coming from various Chinese interests, Chinese businessmen, and even Chinese intelligence. And the scandal was called Chinagate, and the only reason it wasn't successfully investigated was, oh, gee, golly, the White House email server broke down and we weren't making our backup. So all the records about all of this stuff, it's just, we don't have it anymore. Investigation is over. So this brings us up to Hillary as Secretary of State, where she is placing top secret, including special access compartmentalized material on her private email server that had weaker security than Ashley Madison. And when Guccifer said that when he broke into that server, and it was easy to do, he saw at least 10 foreign IPs prowling around the server, looking at documents. So it raises an obvious question that must be asked, and maybe we will finally get to ask it. Was Hillary Clinton replaying the 1994 Chinagate Clinton scandal by selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak private email server to deliver and that charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments, because a huge amount of the money in the Clinton Foundation came from foreign sources? Easy means of delivering secrets, easy means of payment. She doesn't have to actually steal the files like Jonathan Pollard did. She doesn't have to go out and mark mailboxes with chalk like Aldrich Ames did. She didn't have to bundle up the documents in plastic and tape them underneath a bridge at a local park the way Hansen did. It's a perfect system. Now, Hillary Clinton had two shields protecting her from a full investigation as to just what was going on with that private email server, Loretta Lynch and James Comey. Both are no longer able to protect her. And it is time to find out if this nation actually had a serving Secretary of State who committed espionage, betrayed her trust, betrayed the nation, using that weak email server to deliver secret documents to foreign interests, and the charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And in addition, we need to remember, the Clinton Foundation was suspected of actually being both a slush fund and a money laundry, and according to an anonymous FBI insider who was posting all over the web, all of the top politicians in both parties were up to their neck in the Clinton Foundations. We need the truth. We deserve the truth. We can handle the truth. Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. We're going to take a phone call. David in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I had a tidbit about Comey. You remember a few months ago there was a famous bank that got busted.
HSBC.
It's called the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. Massive British bank, registered in London, even though it makes it sound like it's either Hong Kong or Shanghai. Its headquarters is London, and they had been doing drug money laundering for decades. You know, heroin money for, 60 or 80 years or something like that. And they finally get busted, and if you look at Wikipedia about Comey, it says that he had to resign from the HSBC board when he got nominated for FBI director.
Yes. And obviously on the board, he had to know what was going on. And again, that drug cartel is at the heart of what we're seeing unfold before us now, because the rise of the Clintons politically goes all the way back to the CIA's gun and cocaine running operation out of Arkansas down into Nicaragua, which eventually became known as the Iran-Contra scandal. And
Mena, Arkansas, you mean?
Well, Mena was one of the airports, but it was all over the state.
Bill Clinton and Mena, yeah.
Yeah, well, Bill Clinton obviously was in Little Rock, and they set up this system where local companies were manufacturing untraceable lower receivers for M16s, buying the other parts, the spare parts, assembling these weapons, and smuggling them down to Nicaragua, for the Contras to use against the Sandinistas. And because this was an off-the-books operation not approved by Congress, they were funding it by smuggling tons of cocaine back into the United States of America along the same smuggling route. And Bill Clinton set up this money laundering for the CIA that involved land flips, savings and loans, and the payouts were made through an Arkansas state agency called the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which was writing checks of all this money to all these participants, supposedly as business development loans, none of which were ever repaid. And that was the money machine. And so everybody who was connected with that CIA drug running, or the laundering of the money from CIA drug running, they're all part of that, and they're trying to protect each other. And so the question we have here is how much of that HSBC drug money laundering was being done on behalf of the CIA, which traffics not just cocaine, but they've been bringing in heroin. They were doing it during Vietnam, Kun Sa's heroin coming in, and ever since the invasion of Afghanistan, they're bringing it in from there.
Sure. Well, I was going to kind of merge it up to, of course, you know, Skull and Bones and opium, so it's probably just a cousin bank to what they were using. If I understand right, HSBC got started right around the time of our Civil War, but they were smuggling or running the opium trade in China for long before that. So that banking structure and who was, you know, laundering when. But the interconnection of all of these different kind of spider web of crimes that they've got going, knocking out some of these banks is going to make some money shake loose. And so it's whether or not we, the people, want to snap up that loose change, or whether we want to go for the whole picture, just asset forfeiture all of these guys.
I just want the truth to come on out. I think the American people are owed a true and accurate picture of what our political leaders have been doing for the last 30 years. And
sure.
that has been my ambition all along. And it's time for it to come on out. It really is.
Longer than 30 years, though. Yeah, longer than 30 years, though. I mean, this has been going, like I say, HSBC was 1861, maybe, is when they got founded.
Yeah, but let's be accurate. Let's be accurate. When HSBC was handling the banking for Britain's importing of opium into China, it was technically legal back then. We all talk about the fact that the Skull and Bones fraternity was founded on opium money, but at the time it was a legal cash crop. It was looked on as socially inferior. It was politely called the China trade, but at that time in history it was technically legal for them to be doing what they were doing. Today, of course, it's a completely different story.
Well, right, yeah, it's the old write the laws for yourself. Well, that gets to where Comey is, too, with Trump. I think I've mentioned to you that I believe that Trump is organized crime, and that his tie to it is Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn being the power broker of New York City for 40 years, yes, with all of the mob families. And so when you start looking at Trump using him and his associates for his current management of his campaign, was it Manafort and Roger Stone and Dick Morris, and there are a bunch of these guys that are tied to Trump, and they're just pulling an organized crime thing. So you got all of the 100 judges that Obama was never able to get installed. They're sitting empty to this day. Trump is leaving 100 slots open, so no judges. Then he fires all those DAs a few weeks ago. The 50-something of them are missing. Bam, he's not replacing them. Now he's going after the head of the FBI. He fires him, leave up in the air how it's going to be run.
Well, that's not entirely not entirely accurate. And again, anybody who's making that kind of money sooner or later is going to have to make peace with organized crime one way or the other. But having a contact with organized crime does not make you a criminal. And as an example, I use John F. Kennedy, whose family fortune was built in rum running. Old Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger, but John Kennedy got into that White House, and all of a sudden he started thinking, wow, this is real. This isn't a game anymore. And the same thing may be happening to Donald Trump. David, I'm going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And that last commercial should be a wake-up call for everybody because we're always hearing from the corporate media and the government the economy's fine, it's in recovery, unemployment's at 4.4%, and yet everywhere you go, both on the independent and the corporate media, there's just this constant flood of commercials helping people deal with foreclosure, helping people deal with bankruptcy, helping people deal with tax delinquencies, and the sheer volume of those commercials tells you there is a major problem out in the heartland of America with people just trying to get by, and that completely contradicts the idea that we have a good economy. We're going to do a much-delayed shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go back to the phones again. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I don't know where this Trump administration is headed. I would love to see him select Trey Gowdy as the new FBI director.
I agree.
But it seems like the professional, the establishment up on Capitol Hill, they're closing ranks. I had seen a story that little Lindsey Graham wants to investigate Trump's business past. I don't know what that's all about.
Well, he's trying to find a link between Trump's businesses and Russia that would indicate Russian influence. That's their last card they've got to play, is to try and prove that Trump is a Russian stooge, and therefore we should ignore all this other nonsense about email servers and possible spying and treason and betrayal and links to drug smuggling and so forth. It's all a conspiracy theory. Donald Trump is a Russian stooge. And we've reached a point of political infighting that visible to the public. Again, it's a symptom that we saw in the former Soviet Union just before it tore itself apart.
Yeah, and also on the Comey firing, I thought it was interesting. I don't know what his motivation is, or if he thinks it's based on principle. Was Edward Snowden's reaction to this?
Yeah, that
he said he was after me. He was calling for my arrest, but I'm still against his firing. I don't know what his motivation is.
I don't know. Frankly, it makes me wonder if Edward Snowden was just a con job all the way along to just sort of get us used to the idea or sell us the idea that we're under constant surveillance to try and scare us into silence, which, by the way, did not work. But, yeah, for him to make that statement, right now his credibility is in the negative region as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Assange offered Comey a job at WikiLeaks.
Well, Comey knows where all the dead bodies are. I mean, I think it would be great if Comey decided he was going to get his revenge by spilling the beans. I don't think it's going to happen, though. Comey doesn't want to wind up in Fort Marcy Park.
No, Mike. Finally, what's happening in Washington State at this facility? Now, this facility, they manufacture nuclear weapons.
Well, they used to.
The material?
They used to. During the Manhattan Project and then into the Cold War, Hanford was where the weapons material for the warheads was being developed. It's heavily contaminated. It's about half the size of Rhode Island. And now they're trying to deal with the nuclear waste. And there are some processing plants in the center of the facility that extract plutonium from spent reactor fuel rods. And apparently one of the tunnels where they keep the rail cars full of radioactive waste has collapsed. Now, officially they're saying there's no radiation release, but they're acting like there's a real panic going on. There's a no-fly zone. Apparently there are now Chinook helicopters flying patrols around the outside to make sure nobody's walking on in. And I'm still waiting to see if anybody who lives downwind, downstream from that area with a radiation meter starts to say, hey, the numbers are starting to trend upward. But they're not acting like it's all perfectly under control. And so we may have a major problem. And what's really interesting, I was going to mention this earlier in the show, apparently 2 years ago, engineers said these tunnels could collapse. They need to be reinforced, and of course the money wasn't available because we need to spend it bombing people in other countries until they love the United States government.
Right. We, as with the situation in California with that dam.
Yes.
That was ignored, that was neglected. So,
yes.
You know, it's the same old story in this war economy. But, Mike, is this comparable? Could this be comparable, this situation at this facility, to what happened in Chernobyl?
I don't think so, because we're not dealing with chain reactions and meltdowns. The problem is that Hanford is one of the most heavily contaminated locations on the face of the earth, and anything that throws that contamination up into the air is going to be causing problems. Anyway, Bob,
Thank you, Mike.
Got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. hi, America. Welcome back to the show. I was checking my mailbox, and somebody wrote in to remind us. Remember when former FBI Chief James Comey insisted it was North Korea had hacked Sony Entertainment because the hackers got sloppy, and we just know it was then it turned out to be an internal leak. So that's another strike against James Comey. He's out there to sell the official propaganda, not to actually investigate anything. Speaking of investigation, with Comey gone, while we're waiting for Donald Trump to pick a new FBI director, and yes, I agree, Trey Gowdy would be a good one, the deputy FBI director is now the interim FBI director, Andrew McCabe. He's currently under investigation himself. And apparently he's embroiled in one of the Clinton scandals because his wife got funding from a Hillary Clinton fundraiser. It's a very incestuous little community up there in Washington, D.C. Okay, let's see. We're going to go back to the phones. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, you know, people are forgetting, I know you're not, because I saw your Facebook alert this week about, first Lavoy Finnegan and the Bundy Patriots that are still languishing in jail.
Yes.
In a private prison there in southern, being actually beaten up. And they haven't even been gotten bail. And the murder of Lavoy Finnegan. And also the murder of that Chechen guy. I forget his name now, but evidently he was somewhat involved with that so-called bombing there in Boston. Probably knew it was fake. And the FBI murdered him in cold blood. Again, shot him in the back of the head. And a lot of people don't know that FBI agent that did the shooting, very questionable how he could have gotten. I couldn't get a a security clearance when I was a correctional officer down in Texas because I couldn't qualify to work at one of the nuclear plants there at Pantex because my credit was terrible at the time.
Well, you should be glad because the Pantex facility is the one where the tunnel collapsed.
No, that's the one in Washington where it collapsed. Pantex is in Texas.
There's another Pantex. I think it's Pantex up in. Well, okay, I misspoke then.
Yeah, it's right outside of Amarillo. That's where I was living at the time. But that's where they manufacture nuclear bombs and destroy nuclear bombs when they don't need them anymore. But anyway, but as far as this FBI agent, he supposedly was an Oakland police officer, Oakland, California.
Yes.
He was kind of dirty. I think he may have been involved in drug smuggling and all that. And they gave him a parachute. They gave him a disability pension because supposedly he broke his ankle. All right.
Yes.
Now, what are they going to take a guy if he's in a disability? Are they going to take him into the FBI? If his ankle is that bad, would he be able to pass the FBI physical agility and all that? I doubt it. So what I believe happened is this guy probably was dirty, but he had a lot of stuff on other Oakland officials, including maybe even at the time, I believe, Jerry Brown was the mayor at the time. So who knows how many people he might have dirt on. But anyway, the FBI hired him. Okay, very questionable. And then how he got a security clearance is beyond me. And he's the one that actually put the bullet in the back of this guy's head. Or the Chechen, I forget the guy. I can't pronounce his name. He was He was somehow, I think, he was a friend of the Sarnoff brothers.
Oh yeah, the one down in Florida where they kept badgering him to implicate the Tsarnaev brothers in something, and he kept refusing. And then there was an altercation, and the FBI claimed that he'd attacked them or something. And I thought it was the guy who got shot who had the bad ankle.
No, it was the FBI agent. He was that's where he supposedly got a disability pension from. I saw that in the Boston Globe, surprisingly. It came on InfoWars, but nobody's really talked about it for some reason.
Well, we talked about it at the time when it happened because it was clearly a case where the FBI was trying to browbeat this guy into saying what they wanted him to say, and he kept refusing until finally he wanted to leave, and the situation got out of control.
But I have a theory. The FBI is hiring dirty agents. At one time, like under J. Edgar Hoover, they used to actually use the mafia to do their rough work, to rough people over.
So does the CIA. So does the CIA.
And the CIA also.
Yep.
But I think what happens now is they're hiring dirtbags that normally wouldn't be able to qualify, whether maybe cartel criminals, dirty cops.
They're basically hiring the people who are willing to do these things on command.
Yeah, and what they're doing, I believe, is they're, what do you call it again? They're sheep dipping their records. So people don't realize, and they're even putting them through the FBI Academy and all that, so people don't know, and making them actual agents now, as opposed to when Hoover was using the mob to do this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what's going on, and that's what happened to that Chechen guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened with LaVoy Finnegan also, the guy whoever did the shooting of Finnegan. This FBI is, I personally believe it's expanded, but I
would agree with you, and I would agree with you because again, going back to the 1960s COINTELPRO, when that was exposed, everybody grown up with this image of the FBI that we got from TV shows and movies about swell bunch of people and everything, and COINTELPRO showed us the true nature of the FBI, and it's not about crime prevention or law enforcement. It's basically America's version of the Gestapo, enforcing the will of those in power by any means necessary. And that's what COINTELPRO exposed. Now, there were laws that were passed in the wake of COINTELPRO to limit the FBI's ability to engage in domestic covert operations, but all of those laws were repealed during the Clinton administration.
Another thing, too, about this guy, this Chechen guy that was killed, there were 5 agents in there at the time, okay?
Yes.
Now, they say, well, he was an MMA fighter, all right? And they felt their life was in danger, something like that. But first they said he had a weapon, and they say he didn't have a weapon, finally. Now, even if he's an MMA fighter, they would have had pepper spray, they would have had tasers, they would have had all kinds of other non-lethal weapons that they could have used, rather than shooting the guy in the back of the head. That's a bunch of nonsense. Plus, a guy really got to be pretty good to take on 5 grown men by himself. I mean, he's really got, I know in the movies and stuff like that, it's like, they show that. But a guy who's really
okay, the name you're looking for is Ibrahim Todashev. And by the way, that agent who killed him had been previously accused of police brutality. Anyway, listen, we got a bunch of calls waiting, and so I'm going to let you go here. Thank you for the information, and we're going to switch to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. 2 quick questions regarding Comey. Timing's everything. My question to you is, why do you think it happened right now? And the other question is, the head of the IRS, the commissioner, last year, he was about to get impeached. Why in the hell is he still there?
Very, very, very good question. Very good question indeed.
Yeah, because the head of the IRS, he's just as bad as Comey. If you really look what he did, and he was protecting Lois Lerner and other people who were trying to do the right thing, and he basically, was very one-sided when it came to like the Tea Party and other conservative groups. So
okay, well, Lerner wasn't doing the right thing. Lerner was, part of the enabler, and
right.
The question was, from where did these orders come on down to be harassing the Tea Party groups and truth activists and conservative groups in general? Did that come from the top, or was that just something Lois Lerner did on her own? But we'll never really know because, gosh darn it, the hard drive on her computer with all of her emails failed, and they had recently stopped doing backups.
Right. But getting back to my first point, do you think the timing is kind of strange or not?
I'm just glad it happened at this point. It should have happened long before now. I think one of Trump's biggest mistakes was keeping Comey on in the first place. But
right.
I'm hearing all these different explanations for why Comey was fired and why it was now. But apparently the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General had been talking about this for quite some time, and finally Trump said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it, and I know they're going to scream it's because I'm trying to stop the Russian investigation. But again, I think the breaking point may have been when Comey came on out and gave Huma Abedin that get-out-of-jail-free card, on the exact same rationale that he did for Hillary. She didn't mean to do wrong. And to his credit, Trey Gowdy in the hearing said intent is not required. And it may have been a combination of factors. Certainly, looking at the reactions of people like the studio audience at Colbert's show, the American people have zero trust in the FBI and certainly not in Comey. In fact, the government as a whole. And maybe they just, as Trump said, we need to put somebody in charge of the FBI that is going to inspire some confidence and trust in the FBI. That's going to be a very, very tall order, by the way.
Well, that's very true. Well, Michael, I will let you go. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, here's my theory on the Comey thing, and this, I think, boils down to Obama. That the surveillance state Obama was surveilling everybody. They know he was surveilling Trump at least since July and probably way before. And surveilling everybody else. As we all know, Nixon got impeached over a break-in and attempted bugging of one office, not an entire campaign. And then he didn't think he was going to lose or that Hillary was going to lose. And so then he came up with the Russian explanation because he knew that all this apparatus was going to be turned over to Trump and he would be found out for all the horribly unconstitutional surveillance he's been doing on his political opponents and how he weaponized the intelligence system against the other party. And so now we have the Russian thing, and with Comey trying to play both sides at once, both being himself partially involved in it, doing himself, and also in letting her go, saying he was guilty, but it doesn't rise to, there's no intent and all the stuff that we talked about there. And it's just, and now they also lumped onto that. The whole Russian deal was not only could Obama say it was a national security thing that he was doing for cover, but also they could deep six Trump's rapprochement with Russia and play to the media and the military industrial complex for cover. So what do you think?
Well, again, there may be a lot of overlapping agendas here, but I think that right now, I think the American people, and again, this goes back to Colbert's audience, the American people aren't following the narrative coming from the official sources or the corporate media. And politics is perception. And if you remember back during last year where everybody was at the Trump rallies screaming, lock her up, and he was promising a special prosecutor to look into her crimes. But again, we were seeing Loretta Lynch is now confirmed as having assumed a policy of protecting Hillary Clinton from investigation and prosecution. Comey went along with that, was still protecting that secret. And again, if I'm right, if I am correct, and Hillary was in fact, as Secretary of State, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests and getting paid through that foundation, that's a scandal that could bring the entire government down, and that's why everybody's working to protect it. But I'm glad that Comey is finally out, and maybe we're going to start seeing some of these crimes actually get chipped away at the edge. They won't all be exposed for the reason I just said, but it would be nice for enough of a scandal and investigation to prevent Hillary Clinton from ever running for political office again, and basically sort of like send that old guard off into retirement and maybe open some doors to some up-and-comers who are a little bit less compromised by the CIA.
Yeah, but Mike, Comey, Lynch, Eric Holder, Hillary Clinton, it all comes back to Obama. He appointed them all. He let them all ride, and he was giving orders to every one of them. And then, of course, the intelligence community and the people doing all this illegal surveillance, they don't want it to be known that they are basically pay to play themselves, that they're been politicized and weaponized.
Yes.
And so, it really is a drain the swamp thing, and I hope this is the first beginning. I hope to see a little tornado around the drain here pretty quick. And it would be nice, but I still think our only way to avoid World War III
is for a Soviet Union-style collapse of the central federal government. And again, studying what was going on in the Politburo in the months before the Soviet Union collapsed, you saw the same degree of openly public, visible infighting between the various factions.
I fear that you're absolutely right, Mike. I really do. And I don't believe this government can ever be reformed from the inside, no matter who's president.
No, I absolutely agree. I've been working at this for 23 years now, waiting for the good people inside the government to stand up and do something about it, and it simply has not happened. And I think merely the process of being absorbed into the government or into the political system, it is inevitably corrupting of the people. They can go in there with the very best of intentions, but the system goes to work on them to basically make them part of the problem. And so a complete reset at this point looks like not a bad idea.
I hear that. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks. And real quick, we're going to start with Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, a couple things real quick. Getting back to what you were talking about, some of the strikes against Comey with the misinformation about the Sony hack and the rotten fruit from the Boston bombing, the Tadoshev death. I didn't hear... when I heard it was reported about that death, it was 2 agents, and he was questioning their arrangement for his pension and stuff. Well, I don't think you can ask him, consult him anymore, because they died in a premature death off the coast in a supposed training exercise off of Virginia Beach here.
Yeah, how convenient.
Yeah, exactly. So another strike against Mr. Comey. My suggestion for FBI director, Trey Gowdy, or how about Napolitano or Sheriff David Clark?
You mean Judge Napolitano? Maybe, but that would be a good idea. All right, well, listen, we got to let you go, take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got a lot of news to get to. So, Greg in Washington State, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Hey, I want to mention, I don't think I've heard you talk about Henry Kissinger and his recent visit here to Washington, D.C. Hey, every time that guy goes someplace, there's some change in procedures.
Well,
I just have no trust.
Yeah, he's still one of the backroom players, and he's definitely a puller of strings, as it were. And by the way, my apologies. I thought you were in Washington State, not Washington D.C.
Yeah, I'm in Washington State.
Oh, you are in? Okay, all right.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, hey, that little toad. Every time he goes somewhere. And he's been a friend with Putin's for a long time, which troubles me. And another thing I want to mention, Korea. You know, the idea of nuclear bombs dropping, I just don't see that happening. If the nuclear bombs drop, it's a loss of control. And hey, the money junkies, the elite, are control freaks, if anything. So I just don't see any nuclear bombs dropping on...
well, I certainly hope that you are correct, but you need to remember 2 things. First of all, during the startup of the Korean War, there was actually a serious discussion about using nuclear weapons on North Korea to just simply, burn a much wider version of the DMZ across the peninsula. And so, yeah, they were talking about using them back then. Second, looking at an invasion of North Korea, if it's done conventionally on the ground, analysts are predicting something like 250,000 casualties on the U.S. side, and they may just simply decide that a nuclear bomb onto the North Korea's nuclear test facility and wherever they think the existing bombs are being built might be a good way to just shut it all down. But ultimately, they want Kim Jong-un out of power. Apparently, North Korea's uncovered an assassination plot. And they may be looking at a decapitation strike as a more effective way of going at it. But at this point, given how edgy everybody is, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of nuclear weapons being used at some point in the near future. We ended World War II with nuclear weapons. We could easily start World War III with nuclear weapons.
Well, that's possible, but I think that's why Kissinger's in Washington, D.C. You know, he's there to give Trump his marching orders. You know, decrease the tension in North Korea for a while. I mean, there's so many irons in the fire and so many games that the New World Order crowd is playing here that I don't think they can even keep track of them all.
Well, the situation here is, with the South Korean elections, their new president wants reconciliation with North Korea. We're going to be talking about that a little later in the show. Thank you for the call, Greg. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little while here because I do have a bunch of news that I need to get through. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, hour number 2. Phone lines are closed for the moment. I really do have to get through some news here. Now, former CIA officer Ray McGovern is out there basically saying that all of this claims about Russian hacking and the Trump dossier about the prostitutes is actually an embarrassment to the U.S. intelligence profession. Among the rank-and-file case officers, they do have certain standards. They follow certain rules of evidence because their job is to provide the most accurate, undistorted view of what's really going on to the leadership. And to see the top CIA official just out there propagandizing Russia's bad and Russia's doing this and Russia's doing that, it's building up a tremendous amount of hostility and resentment within the intelligence community who feel that their reputation is suffering because of the misbehavior of people like Clapper. And I can understand why that would be the case here. As an American, I'm feeling like my image to the rest of the world, all of our image to the rest of the world, is suffering because of the behavior of people like Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein and the rest. Now, interestingly enough, on the Senate hearing, when they were talking to retired CIA Director James Clapper, and apparently one of the senators asked Director Clapper, have you used unmasking on President Trump, any of his campaign staff, or any U.S. senators? And Clapper said yes. Funny how the corporate media seems to have missed that one. Meanwhile, the White House leakers have a new target. There seems to be a rebellion against the deep state growing within the White House. The leaks are continuing, and right now the leaks seem to be focusing on H.R. McMaster. And, of course, he is very pro-war. He's trying to get Donald Trump to attack more countries and do more things. And apparently the leaks coming on out, they're building pressure for him to step down as Trump's second national security advisor. And they want him out. The sooner, the better. So we may be seeing a White House and a Trump administration struggling to recover their authority under the law. Now, amazingly enough, there's an article that came out here in Investment Watch blog. Apparently, companies out in California are still paying people to protest Donald Trump. Trump has been in the White House for more than 100 days, and there is no sign of a let-up. Just this constant, we are going to resist, we are going to resist. Of course, the only thing Hillary is resisting right now is arrest. Meanwhile, Obama has managed to pick up a $3.2 million check for a speaking gig in Milan, Italy. And I'm beginning to think all these huge checks for speaking engagements, it's another form of political payoff. Sort of a legally acceptable bribe here. And as is typical for Obama, he referred to himself 216 times during the speech. Now, Pew Research has been running some surveys of the American people, and they're finding, to nobody's real surprise, that hardly anybody trusts the federal government any longer. And they're out there wringing their hands. Why don't people trust the federal government? Well, it's simple. The federal government has proven itself to be untrustworthy time after time after time after time after time. Trust is something that cannot be demanded. It must be earned. The same thing for loyalty. Same thing for respect. You have to earn it from we the people. And trust, loyalty, and respect they're all two-way streets. You have to give back as much as you get. Now, over in the media, in this case specifically the Daily Mail in Great Britain, they're already starting to ramp up the propaganda about Syria and the sarin attack, and CNN has new photos of the aftermath of the attack at Idlib. So they're just beating the war drums for an invasion of Syria. Everybody's concerned because drones are showing over 400 U.S. armored military vehicles on the border with Jordan. And some of the armor is Jordanian M60 tanks. And they're just 43 kilometers away from the Syrian border. All they're looking for is an excuse. And last week we were hearing all these stories about how Press TV was actually hired by a Western country to film a new fake Syrian gas attack. And this is a big production. This isn't the white helmets in their camcorder. This is a big production with over 30 vehicles as props. It's going to be a huge thing. And coupled with that was this bizarre story that somebody broke into a hospital in that area, broke into the morgue, and stole the bodies of 20 children. For set decoration, no doubt. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, interestingly enough, over in Iraq, finally starting to see a little bit of reconstruction. This is a story that came out of Catholic News Agency. And they've started rebuilding the city of Baghdad, the reconstruction of the towns in the plain of Nineveh. They basically put up a cross, and they're starting to try and get their life back to what it was before all this nonsense with Saddam's non-existent nukes and the U.S. invasion and overthrow. Meanwhile, Turkey is warning the U.S. against giving any more weapons to the Syrian Kurds, who Turkey sees as terrorists, and is actually threatening to end Turkey's strategic partnership with the United States. And that is really going to complicate things in that part of the world, where we're not sure who's on whose side anymore. Meanwhile, over in Israel, their parliament is getting ready to actually pass a law that will declare Israel a state for Jewish people. It will be an ethno-state, which is another word for an apartheid state, where people of the Jewish faith are first-class citizens and everybody else is relegated to a subordinate social and legal status. Now, possibly in response to that, Donald Trump has canceled his plans to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump seems to be growing a little bit of a spine. And I see that as a positive development as well. Now, getting on over to South Korea, Moon Jae-in, during his inauguration, in his inaugural speech, says he's willing to go to North Korea and meet with Kim Jong-un and try and derail the high tensions, say, we don't really have a reason to be angry with each other. We've got a lot of reasons to just calm things down. Neither one of the nations can afford to spend all this money on weapons while their people are going hungry. Of course, it's worse in the north than the south, but it's even there in the south. You would think everybody would say, huzzah, huzzah, the tensions are winding down. But unfortunately, we're getting stories like this one in Japan Times saying, well, it's all well and good if South Korea wants to be friends with North Korea, but it's not really going to significantly change the policy of everybody else. If anything, it'll just drive South Korea away from Japan and the United States, which maybe South Korea is ready to do that. Now, North Korea has arrested several Americans And they are claiming they have uncovered an elaborate CIA-backed plot to assassinate Kim Jong-un, and saying it proves that the United States is a state sponsor of terror. And what's interesting is in this newspaper article, which is over at ABC, they're out there saying, are these people crazy? I mean, the attitude from ABC is, it's just silly. It's just plain silly to think that the U.S. government does assassinations and coups d'etats to other countries. I mean, who could even think such a thing as that? Well, ask the people in Ukraine, or Afghanistan, or Iraq, or Libya, or Yemen, or Iran. Now, satellite imagery is showing that Beijing is starting to install missile systems on the South China Sea islands. That is definitely going to ramp things up. They have this one well-positioned islet in the contested waterway, and it looks like China is getting ready to defend it against outside incursion. Another big scandal over in Europe. Apparently, a German soldier was caught posing as a refugee and planning a false flag terror attack. That one hasn't gotten a lot of coverage either. Meanwhile, down in South America, there have been these 41 activists in Colombia who were assassinated, and it is threatening the Colombian government's peace agreement with the FARC rebels, because the agreement requires the government to protect activists and former FARC fighters, but the government is not living up to the requirement. Well, maybe somebody wants the agreement to fail, and they are the ones who killed these 41 activists. Now, yesterday we were talking about all these U.S. military assets. They're hovering around the borders with Venezuela, supposedly for an exercise. We coupled that with the U.S. history of wanting to intervene in Venezuela and ask, are they considering an invasion? And sure enough, here we are. U.S. warns of military action and more sanctions in Venezuela. And to top it all off, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio has introduced a bill to allocate $20 million toward regime change in Venezuela. They want control of that country. They want control of the oil. They want that oil to only be sold for U.S. dollars. And they certainly do not want the profits from that oil to be spent on the Venezuelan people, like Hugo Chavez wanted to do. What a stupid thing to do, to take the wealth of a nation and spend it on the people. The U.S. is now considering sending Patriot missiles to Lithuania amid the Moscow threat, of which there isn't any. Look who is forward-basing weapons on whose nation's border. Not Russia. You don't see Russian naval forces tooling around the Gulf of Mexico or off the coast of California. You don't see Russia stationing tanks and artillery and missiles in Canada and Mexico. We know who the aggressor is here. According to Wayne Madsen, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis actually wants a military showdown with Russia. Here's your rifle, James. Here's your parachute. Here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA torture centers. Go and have fun. We'll call Putin and tell him you are on your way to kick his butt all by yourself. We're seeing continued turmoil over in Macedonia. All kinds of rioting all over the streets, all caused by austerity, poor economic conditions. Some people are saying it's another U.S. color revolution. Maybe, maybe not, because apparently most of the protests are around the EU delegation embassy in Macedonia. Allegations that the European Union is trying to choose Macedonia's leaders, which, yeah, they are. Now, getting on to the war on drugs, Jeff Sessions wants to bring back long mandatory prison sentences for minor drug offenses. And he's basically looking at policy changes set in place by the Obama administration that eliminated harsh punishments for low-level drug crimes. Now, one of the first questions is Jeff Sessions invested in the private prison industry? But beyond that, it's a little more complicated. For the drug dealers and the drug traffickers, yeah, I think that's a good idea. But for the end users, you need to remember they are victims as well. And addiction is an illness. And throwing them in jail for a long, long time is not really the solution to that. Although it'll certainly make those prison factories, those slave labor factories, profitable to have more people. Speaking of drugs, down in Mexico, the cartel drug war, fueled in part by weapons supplied by the U.S. government under Fast and Furious, has made Mexico more deadly than Iraq or Afghanistan. The drug war in Mexico was ranked 2016's second deadliest conflict in the world, with only the war in Syria being worse. So that's what's going on down there as well. Speaking of drugs, and I hope none of you listening to this show actually use these things. But if you are into the opiates, you need to be very careful. And I'm going to preface this by saying that back when I lived in Southern California, there was a synthetic heroin that was going around. It was called China White to make it sound like it was the stuff coming in from China, but it wasn't. It was a synthetic called D-alpha fentanyl. And anybody who used it wound up with permanent Parkinson's symptoms. So you got to be careful. Now the new problem is somebody is taking this tranquilizer made for elephants, carfentanil, and it is incredibly powerful. It's 10,000 times more potent than morphine and 100 times stronger than fentanyl. It is so deadly that just by rubbing your finger across it, you can receive a lethal dose. 20 micrograms is lethal to humans. So first of all, don't be using the stuff anyway. And second of all, if you are using the stuff, be very, very careful what you're being. Because after all, these are drug criminals. It's not like they have to get FDA approval for what they're selling you. Not that these days FDA approval means all that much. Now, turning to the economic news, apparently new mortgages are drying up. And the banks are trying anything they can to try and stimulate people borrowing mortgages for new homes. And what's making it difficult is in these uncertain economic times, nobody knows what they're going to be making a year from now. There's no guarantee. Over the last several years, we've seen people lose jobs, and when they have to take newer jobs with lower wages and salaries. It's a repeating situation. The earning potential of the American people is being driven down to match the third world levels as part of the plan for the New World Order. We all have to be in the same degree of poverty before they can really drop those borders. So Chase is offering 100,000 credit card reward points for new mortgage customers. Now, I've never paid attention to credit card rewards. Right now, Claire and I are just trying to get all of our credit cards paid off before things really get unhappy. So I don't know what these credit card points are actually worth, but I know that they're a real come-on. I'm seeing them on all the TV commercials. Use our credit card. You will get points. And I have no idea what the points may be worth. I know that when they were talking about win miles when you're flying with an airline, and it turned out the miles on your account didn't mean a real mile of travel. It takes huge, huge amounts of the miles and points, I think, to get anything. Now, if I'm wrong, if these points are actually worth something, let me know. But I have a sneaking suspicion that 100,000 credit card reward points will get you a toaster. Meanwhile, the Guarantee Bank has been shut down by federal regulators as of last Friday, and they were unable to recover from the losses they sustained from the housing and foreclosure crisis, and they have now officially failed. They'd been in business for 94 years, and they were based in Glendale. I remember seeing them when I was living in Southern California. And only the 12 standalone branch locations in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota are going to stay open, but they're going to be reopened as branches of First Citizens Bank. First Citizen has agreed to come on in and acquire 12 of the local bank facilities and bring them under their bank. But it's another warning sign. We're starting to see banks fail. Now, as you know, healthcare is, well, actually, we're coming up now on a commercial break, so I'm going to leave this until after we come back. The phone lines are now open if you want to call on in. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, the health care debate rages on. It's now in the Senate. The House passed their version of Trump care. And the Senate is going to look at it. They're probably going to make a lot of changes. And over on the Democratic side, they're just wringing their hands and crying that Obamacare might be brought to an end. And they're out there trying to just say, we must keep Obamacare. It's got his name on it. It's been a wonderful program, which it hasn't. It was an unmitigated disaster. And they're going to be staging mock funerals in public places for the death of Obamacare and all the people who will die without Obamacare. But Obamacare was an absolute unmitigated disaster. And I'm not just talking about the website, how much that cost and how poorly it performed. It actually made health care much more expensive because the Obamacare-compliant health insurance policies were much more expensive. And the deductibles were sky high. It was basically a giveaway to the health insurance industries who expected to make huge amounts of profits. And then, of course, the government would get their mafia-like piece of the action with taxes coming back from those health insurance companies. It actually didn't work out. Most people could not afford those more expensive policies. And they opted to take the IRS penalty instead. And it underscores something I've been saying for quite some time. There is a willful blindness in the corridors of power and on Wall Street. They don't understand that the amount of money still out here in the American public is finite. It's not a bottomless well. It never really was. And if you raise prices on health insurance, then people have to cut back someplace else, like food, or going without new clothes, or not buying a new car. The amount of actual economic activity remains constant, and the tax revenues remain constant. All of this, getting people to buy more expensive this or that, it just shifts who within the economy is at the moment getting more. But it's not actually improving the economy as a whole until you bring back high wages and salaries for working and middle-class people so that they can trade their labor for decent amounts of money that they can then go over to the car dealerships with and buy a new car, or go to the shopping malls and buy something. Fortunately, we're in a wartime economy right now, and the mindset is suck everything out of the people and put it into making more bombs. Okay, we're going to take a quick phone call here. Jack in Louisiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about when you worked at NASA.
Yes.
Were you a member of Project Alpha 11-Niner?
Nope, never heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, you could look it up, A119, and the same as the Russians had. So you're not aware of them detonating an isotope explosive on the moon?
No, I've never heard of such a thing.
I watched it live. They did it to take seismographic readings. Two of them took an auger and went out with a little car and drilled a hole. Then they put silver tape out from the hole. Then they said, we're putting the explosive in the hole now.
Okay.
And Walter Cronkite said, well, what kind of explosive could that be? It can't be a stick of dynamite. There's no air up there. It wouldn't burn. And NASA's immediate reply was, no, Walter, it's an isotope explosive.
Okay, well,
and,
you're talking
about
NASA
about 10 years ago,
hang on. Let me talk because we're almost out of time on this. There was a seismic charge, but Walter Cronkite was wrong. A stick of dynamite can explode in a vacuum because all the chemicals needed for combustion are inside the stick of dynamite. Same thing with TNT. It doesn't require an outside oxidizer. Only a fuel air bomb needs that. But yes, they did have some seismic charges there, but they're basically the same thing that they use for seismic charges here on Earth. And in addition, when the astronauts left the moon, they would then crash the upper stage of the LEM back onto the moon in order to generate another seismic pulse for those seismographs.
Okay, well, they won't admit that they detonated anything but the rockets detonated to send it back to the mothership. They won't admit they had detonated anything on the moon.
Well, no, there were seismic charges, okay? But they were
okay,
like
good.
firecrackers. Firecrackers. All right, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking at Fox News, and even they are acknowledging that Comey's credibility was badly damaged when he came on out in that press conference listing the Title 18 felony violations Hillary Clinton had committed, and then saying we're not going to recommend charges because we can't find that she meant to do wrong, even though that is not required by Title 18. So they're starting to pull away from this, oh, it's Russia this, Russia that, Russia that. No, they're understanding what's really going on. And now, of course, they're talking about rebuilding the credibility and trust in the FBI. That is going to be a tall order, especially for those of us old enough to remember COINTELPRO. Not to mention the FBI's personal interference in my life back in 1990. Getting on over to Brexit. Interestingly enough, Julian Fouché of Cornell Poyan Avocats, based in Bordeaux, is talking about how the EU referendum, the Brexit, may have been illegal. Apparently there was something about what was called a 15-year rule and how it may have expired. So they're trying to bring a court case where they can simply say the Brexit didn't happen. By hook or by crook, the EU does not want any of their member nations to leave. Once EU, always EU. Nobody leaves the European Union. It's like a nation motel. Nations go in, but they don't come out. Meanwhile, apparently a Spanish diplomat has basically ripped into Germany for its shameless bid for European Union expansion, and saying that the EU has got problems right now, and trying to expand it right now is only going to make those problems worse. But it seems like Brussels' idea is if we grab new territory and new wealth, then we can stave off the economic collapse, which was basically Rome's whole approach to staying afloat during the age of the empires. We're running out of money, let's go out and conquer another foreign land and loot their wealth. Look how that ended up here. Now the good news is Trump's immigration enforcement has slowed illegal border crossings by 76%. At this rate, he doesn't need a wall. And I don't think he ever really did. If you enforce the existing immigration laws in this country, if you stop offering free stuff to people who come into this country illegally, they will stop coming in. And it's already happening. Still, the New World Order wants to blur us all together, and so apparently the Los Angeles public schools have passed a resolution making all school campuses sanctuaries for illegal immigrants in danger of being deported. So I can already see Los Angeles public school and the back area, which used to be the football field and the exercise area and the basketball courts, is all covered with tents. They're going to be degrading the educational experience of school children in pursuing this globalist agenda of we want the illegal immigrants and the refugees here, and we want to spread everybody everywhere so that you can't remember who you are, who you're supposed to be, what nation you're supposed to be on, what bathroom to use. Because people who have a strong sense of who they are, where they come from, what their history and their culture is, they're harder to control. So they want to erase these cultural icons like the flag of the Confederacy and the monuments. And they're even starting to criticize people who wear red, white, and blue as being insensitive to the refugees. Along with all this nonsense about gender is fluid. Gender is just open to interpretation. They're trying to get us so confused about ourselves that we can be talked into anything. Boy, it's not a good time to be in the airline industry. There's been another incident. A Southwest Airlines jet was actually rolling into the gate at Burbank. They were on the ground. The flight was over, and apparently people were starting to get on up, and there was a little bit of a shove, and it just erupted into a fist fight, and it got caught on video. And I can probably understand these passengers. It's been a very long, uncomfortable flight with your knees shoved up into your chest cavity, and that's on top of the TSA abuse to get onto the plane. People's fuses are very short. Or maybe it's just another case of prescription antidepressants here. Apparently there's been another embarrassment against American Airlines. A woman was flying from Baltimore to Tucson, Arizona. She had a carry-on bag. Her daughter had just passed away and been cremated, and the woman was taking her dead daughter's ashes back home to Tucson. The airline forced her to check the bag and then lost it. So that's another embarrassment. I think the airlines need to get their sense of humanity back. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Will in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. I was looking through a subject that I was doing some research on. I'm a scumbag attorney here in Minnesota.
Okay.
And was having a debate.
If I know any
someone.
scumbags who need legal services, I'll send them on to you.
Well, look, I sue debt collectors for a living.
Good.
They harass my clients. I make them wish to God they'd gone into trash collecting instead of debt collecting. And believe me, I'm pretty good at what I do.
Well.
But I was having a debate on someone whether or not the FBI and the feds ever make mistakes in their investigations and wrongly accuse people of engaging in conduct that they don't do. And this person is, of course, of the opinion that, well, if the FBI is investigating you, then you must have done something wrong. And it reminds me of a case that actually is what prompted me to decide to become an attorney, so that I can make life miserable for the government every chance I can. And the case is actually mentioned on your web page, or on your website. Specific link is whatreallyhappened.com/all cap rancho/politics/MENA MENA/wormscan.html. I know that's hard to relay over the radio.
I know the one you're talking about.
And I'm speaking in regards, if you do a search on the page, if you look for Gene Faust, GENEFOUST.
Mm-hmm.
And the citation comes from a newspaper, and it basically, if you don't mind, I can read it to you.
Yeah, real quick.
It says, Sherry Lorraine Hodge pled guilty to conspiracy to transport stolen money across state lines, $1.9 million. Hodge says she gave $300,000 to Gene Faust, 49, detective sergeant and head narcotics officer and 21 veteran of the Oak Ridge, Tennessee Police Department. The head narcotics officer was to invest it to make more money for me. Ms. Hodge's attorney was saying this, and apparently the FBI investigated. It says here, a little later, it says, the FBI searched the home of head narcotics officer, investment advisor to the STARS, C. Gene Faust. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, where's the rest of the story? Because while this all might be true in terms of what was alleged, it doesn't finish the story and say that the FBI actually brought criminal charges against the U.S. Attorney's Office, prosecuted in the fullest extent that they possibly could, and a jury of his peers acquitted him. And the background of this case, the reason why the FBI thought they had their guy and was just absolutely convinced that he was guilty of sin, was because they, quite frankly, didn't do their job. Now, to put this in context, my own father is a graduate of the FBI Academy. He was in law enforcement for years, and my sister is in law enforcement with the Justice Department. But I myself decided to make life miserable for these bastards all I can. And so it bugs me when I see stories that don't show how matters are finally resolved, where they create the impression that somebody is guilty by mere accusation, but they don't show that the person has been tried and found innocent, which is essentially what the jury came back in this particular matter. The FBI was under the impression that because Gene drove a brand new Cadillac every single year that he must be getting dirty money. I mean, policeman's salary, how can he afford to have a brand new Cadillac every single year? And how can he afford to send his two sons to the most expensive private school in the country? It just doesn't make any sense. Well, they never bothered to stop and think that his ex-mother-in-law had more money than God, and she paid for her grandkids to go to that school.
Yeah.
And that bought a brand new Cadillac twice a year, and she liked her son-in-laws. She couldn't stand her own daughters, so she gave her son-in-laws, including her ex-son-in-law, Gene, that Cadillac. She bought a new Cadillac every 6 months, and she'd give the old one to Gene and one to the other fellow. Well, every 6 months that she was giving away a Cadillac, but it looked like he was getting a new one once a year. And of course, he would take and sell the previous year's model, and he kept the money. His Cadillac to sell if he wanted. But because he had this revenue stream that they never bothered to even look into, they were just convinced that he must be dirty.
That's a classic case of profiling gone wrong and a failure to do due diligence. You're absolutely right about that. But the FBI has a long history of framing people for political gain. James Earl Ray, certainly. Timothy McVeigh is another good example. And then, of course, we had that scandal that came out years ago when Frederick Whitehurst, who was head of the FBI lab, blew the whistle and said the lab routinely rigged laboratory test results to favor the prosecution, and it resulted in a lot of verdict reversals. A lot of cases had to be dropped or retried, and Whitehurst was demoted to head of the paint chip lab. But yeah, the FBI is not the swell bunch of Joes you see on TV shows and movies. They do a lot of this behavior, and back when J. Edgar Hoover was head of the FBI, his number one rule, unwritten, was never embarrass the agency, meaning, you're going to go out and do this stuff, don't get caught doing it. And even Hoover himself was not above, pandering to the media and lying to them. When Melvin Purvis got Dillinger, at first Hoover tried to claim that he personally had taken Dillinger down. Then, of course, he had to back off and say, no, it was Melvin Purvis did it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's like Obama saying that he's the one who shot Osama.
Yeah.
And right. You got to scratch your head and wonder, where the hell do these people get off? Now, don't misunderstand. There are a lot of guys in the FBI who take their job very seriously, and they do their job honorably and with respect not only for the agency but also for the citizenry. They treat people who are being accused of crimes with respect and dignity. And then you have your bad apples. What percentage of it? Well, that's up to debate. Is it 50-50 good and bad, or is it 1% making 99% look awful? I myself look at my own legal profession. I say 99% of attorneys give the rest of us a bad name, and that's true of any profession. Okay,
that's
true. It doesn't matter. You pick any profession, you're going to, even radio guys. You've got folks that do stupid things in radio. You've got folks that do stupid things in football. Pick any profession out there. You're going to find somebody that's going to be a complete horse's ass. And but that's just the nature of it. And when I saw this blurb on here, I was actually looking for the records related to the acquittal on his case. That's when, in the Google search, I found this, and I thought, well, maybe it might be a good idea for you guys to make some changes to this so that folks understand that not everybody who's accused of this is actually guilty. In fact, the reason why this particular person, from what I understand, I don't know this firsthand, I think I was 19 when the acquittal occurred, and it was actually the first time I ever tasted champagne. It was at his acquittal party. But my dad had known Gene for years. They actually both were detectives in the Oak Ridge Police Department. My dad was no longer with the department at the time. Apparently this person, this so-called informant for the Fed's case, had been a confidential informant for Gene. And she was pissed at him for some reason. I don't know if it was because her boyfriend was getting tossed and sent to jail or what. But she was mad at him. And she got arrested for transporting the money by the feds. And she decided to kill two birds with one stone, get herself out of jail while getting even with the guy who's sending her boyfriend or whoever off to...
That's been a big problem with confidential informants. I mean, look at the Whitey Bulger case. Where this guy just played the FBI like a cheap fiddle for year after year after year.
Not everybody's going to be a if you're familiar with the Blacklist program on TV with James Spader, not everybody's an informant like he is, where they're actually turning over real criminals. Sometimes they're turning over innocent people who they just have a grudge against. I mean, God help me if my ex-wife ever decides to be an informant.
Well, sometimes it's actually very common for drug dealers, when they get caught, to become a confidential informant, and then they inform on their competition. So the government takes out their competition, so they don't have to drive by in an old Ford with a Thompson submachine gun and do the dirty work themselves. Okay?
In some respects, that's actually better for society that they do it that way if the other people are actually guilty, because it's better for the police to pick them up than to actually pick them up off the street in body bags. And, under those circumstances, if you're catching actual criminals, I have no problem with one criminal ratting out another criminal. What I do have a problem with is when a criminal rats out an innocent person.
I would have a problem with that as well. Listen, we're out of time. We got to take a break for the commercial. Thank you for all the amazing information, and congratulations on your particular niche in the lawyering field here. And it sounds to me like you're actually probably doing a lot of good out there. So thank you very much for that. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And that last caller prompted a huge outpouring of emails that are basically saying they disagree. They think that the vast majority of FBI agents are corrupted and willing to break the law and cause harm to innocent people. Let's see. Here's one. The FBI helped cover up Bundy in Oregon. This caller is damage control call. People are sending me links to all these stories that we've reported on before. FBI admits flaws in hair analysis over decades, Washington Post. U.S. admits FBI falsified evidence to obtain convictions. FBI admits forensic evidence errors in hundreds of cases, and so forth and so on. And again, certainly my own personal experience with the FBI tends to go along with that. I would like to think there are some FBI or CIA or NSA agents who are really trying to do a really good job, but they're definitely overwhelmed. And even our caller did joke about it. He said 99% of the lawyers are giving the rest of us a bad name. And I think that could be said for these excuse me, got a sneezing fit there. I think the same thing could be said for the FBI. Well, there's a lot of pollen in the air. For the CIA, FBI, NSA, for the government as a whole. You know, it's the bad 99% that are giving the rest a bad name. So, moving on here, let's talk a little bit about Hanford. I'm almost feeling like we're being Fukushima'd in terms of the media. Remember when Fukushima first blew up and they came out with this announcement about this insane amount of radiation that was pouring out of there? And then 24 hours later they said, oh, no, it was a calculator error. One of our engineers made a mistake. It's really just a little. You don't need to worry about it. And there was the photo of the explosion in one of the reactors, and they said it was just a buildup of hydrogen, and that's what exploded. The reactor is still fine. And hydrogen, when it burns, it produces water vapor, which is white. And plume of smoke over the reactor was this pale, sickly yellow-green, which happens to be the same color as the quadrivalent form of plutonium oxide. So, yeah, they're going to be lying about it because they don't want a panic downstream and downwind of Hanford, which is already one of the worst nuclear contaminated sites on the Earth. So basically what it is, they have these processing plants there at Hanford that are extracting plutonium from used up nuclear reactor fuel rods, because as the reactors generate electricity, the uranium is turned into a bunch of fission byproducts, one of which is plutonium, and that makes really good bomb stuff. And so Hanford is extracting the plutonium to make more bombs with. And they have, I think, a total of 6 of these facilities in the middle of Hanford. For some reason, they're called canyons. But the radioactive waste is stored on railway cars in underground tunnels. And one of those has collapsed. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we get back to more phone calls, I'm still getting a lot of emails from that the lawyer who called on in, sending me all these stories. Al Sharpton's secret work as an FBI informant. Sharpton was eager to get slice of 1980s Coke deal. Well, this is all about Sharpton, so we don't need to go too far into that. But, yeah, I think the general public perception, and that's what we need to be dealing with right here. The public perception of the FBI is not very good. All of the propaganda from the TV shows and the movies did not work. The revelations of COINTELPRO, certainly this recent practice of having informants find some loser that can be talked into committing an act of terror, and then the FBI supplies the bombs and all the equipment, then they swoop in for the arrest and they get headlines, and then 6 months down the road, the judge throws the case out of court as an obvious case of entrapment. Yeah, we see what the FBI as an institution is really like, and if there are some good people in there, either they need to speak out or they are going to be cast in with the 99% who are making the rest look bad here. So we were talking about Hanford, and we're talking about these processing plants that are inside the center of the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, where they will process used reactor fuel rods to extract the plutonium to make bombs with, and the radioactive waste left over are stored on railroad cars in these underground tunnels, and one of the tunnels did collapse. And even though officially they're saying there's no detectable radiation release, I mean, how could they possibly tell over the background, the natural contaminated background? But still, hundreds ordered to stay inside after tunnel collapse in Washington State. And the facility is called Purex, not Pantex. I was wrong about that. So emergency crews are working on that. Now, the really interesting thing about this is apparently 2 years ago, there was a study that looked at those tunnels and said they are at risk of collapse. And somebody else wrote on in, I haven't verified this for myself, saying that there was a swarm of quakes in the area that could have weakened the tunnels even further. But apparently 2 years ago, the U.S. Department of Energy was warned that 2 of the tunnels containing radioactive waste at the Hanford nuclear reservations were vulnerable to collapse. And the tunnel that did collapse was one of those that the warnings had been issued on. Okay, let's go back and take some phone calls here. Nico in Southern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, nui nui, Mike.
Aloha, nui nui.
So, I called to talk about the new mortgage scam, but to briefly touch on the FBI, I've worked for some pretty large corporations, and I've worked for corporations when they're on a downswing, and what I've noticed that when they run out of money, people get scared for their job, and what they do is they, say a QA inspector. They will try to find or even cause an issue to report on so that they're like, oh, we we're important. Don't fire
Yes.
us. And I think the FBI, I think you see where I'm going with that,
yes,
right?
Yes, I do. And it is a factor. It is a factor.
Yeah, so
I mean,
now,
that was what led,
the,
that's what led to that raid on Waco by the BATF. I mean, the BATF had recently been given law enforcement powers of their own. They had abused them. There had been several public relations disasters in a row with wrong doors being kicked down and innocent homeowners being shot by the BATF. And Congress was thinking about rescinding BATF's law enforcement authority. And so the BATF needed a big, spectacular bust where they could say, see, we're necessary, we're important. And they chose to go after that church in Waco, Texas, because the church funded itself buying used guns, repairing them, refurbishing them, and reselling them, which is perfectly legal activity. This is all in Texas and so forth. And so they figured, we'll go on in and we'll arrest all these people and we'll say, look, they had an illegal arms factory and armaments, and we'll look important, and Congress will not be able to shut us down with that much positive press. And, of course, it turned into an epic fail and a disaster, which had to be basically ended by gassing that entire church of people to death with a poison gas that's actually illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war.
Yeah, that's right. I guess Waco was BATF's Grenada, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean by that. Well, in the case of Grenada, it wasn't a push for more money. It was an attempt to distract from the Beirut bombing scandal.
Perfect. Well, I actually had called. I don't know if this is the right part of the show, but I jumped in a little bit late. And I guess, forgive me if you've already reported on this, but they found a new way to inflate the housing market and have Wall Street, get a bunch of money that doesn't exist, post 2008 using broker-priced opinion. Have you heard about this whole thing?
Just in passing, I don't know the fine details. Before we go any further, I want to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. So can you sort of back up and give us the Cliff Notes version of how this scam works?
Well, sure. As we know, they back in 2008 with the mortgages, they rated a bunch of toxic mortgages AAA.
Yes.
And you had that whole story. We know that well. What they're doing now, the way around it is that they have these Wall Street securitized bonds that the taxpayers are on the hook for. And what they're doing is they have these banks, they're doing what's called a broker-priced opinion. And they're not even using appraisers. They're just basically, having these houses, backed by bonds, and they are valuing these houses at grossly over the true value. And people will drive by, take a picture of the front, and they'll say, oh, it's worth this much. And I think the article came out of Zero Hedge. So basically, we're on the hook for these houses that are worth anywhere from 50 to maybe who knows how much more than they're really worth. And when everything comes down, we're going to have a massive deflation in that market as well. And we're on the hook for all that money that doesn't exist.
Boy, that really is a scam. That really is a scam.
Yeah,
and the fact that they're planning this ahead of time. They're planning this ahead of time, that when the crash comes, they're going to suck what's left of the people's money out of their pockets. That really, I think it does show. Again, Wall Street's the same way. It's the bad 99% who makes everybody look good.
It is. I'll post the article. I'm one of your members. I post articles, so I'll post it on your website so you can take a look at it.
Please do. I do want to look at that.
Mahalo, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, getting on back to the world of nuclear radiation, there's apparently another concern coming on out of Fukushima. Now, yesterday I was talking about how if you look at Fukushima through Google Earth, you are going to see just the hundreds and hundreds of these tanks holding radioactive wastewater and other debris that they're now thinking about putting in giant tanks and dropping into the ocean, which I don't think is a real solution. It just makes the problem look like it's gone away. But there's another issue as well, because if you look at the grounds around Fukushima, along with the tanks holding liquids, there are these bags that are holding up debris swept from the ground. Leaves, twigs, dirt. They basically tried to take all of the contaminated materials off the ground at Fukushima and bag them on up. So far, so good. Here's the problem. Decaying biological matter produces methane gas, and some of these bags are full of methane gas now, and there's a concern all it's going to take is one lightning strike in a storm to set them all off, and there's going to be a huge radioactive cloud from all the burning fires spreading all over the place. And the government of Japan has already told people it's okay to move back in near the reactor site. Most of the people who moved out don't want to come back. But they're creating incentives to try and repopulate the area, bring back its economy and economic base. But yeah, the idea that there are all these bags filled with radioactive waste that is producing methane gas, that is a risk factor. Now, it might be worthwhile to think about putting up the equivalent of a Faraday cage / lightning rods over these bags. Just have some poles and stretch a wire mesh across that's grounded so that a lightning strike coming to the ground hits the grid and gets deflected off to one side rather than hit the bags. That, to me, seems like a reasonable solution, not that expensive. It underscores again that these radioactive disasters, they don't kid around. They're always going to be horrendous. Okay. As you know, there is now a move to basically ban laptops in the cabins of aircraft. Probably they got sick and tired of complaints from passengers that that little bit of room between you and the seat back in front of you isn't big enough for a laptop anyway, especially when they're leaning back and the top of your laptop is leaning toward you. So now they're talking about a laptop ban in the cabin on the excuse that it's possible to put a bomb inside a laptop. Well, if you look at modern laptops, there's no room inside. And if you understand anything about explosives, for an explosive to be effective, it can't be spread out on a thin layer. It has to be in the proper shape and the proper tamping, or you're just going to get a puff of smoke. This is the new thing, the new way to protect your security. You have to check your laptop in as checked baggage, where it's going to get slammed on the ground by the baggage handlers and possibly looted. And yes, I have had electronics stolen from my luggage at Heathrow Airport. I'm sorry, that's Heathrow Airport over in London. It does happen. And I've also had a laptop dropped and destroyed by TSA up in Seattle. So apparently now the United Nations Aviation Agency is thinking about a global ban on laptops, even though it's upsetting airline passengers. They're absolutely not happy about this. Well, if you don't like it, we're going to make it global. It's just another way of exerting authority and justifying more security experts. Make sure you're not carrying a laptop. What will it be next? Your smart device, your tablet, your smartphone? This is an open-ended prohibition. At the rate we're going, we're all going to be flying in the aircraft cabin totally naked. And down in the baggage area, they can just help themselves to whatever they feel like. And by the way, thefts from baggage, that is a major problem, even today. All right, let's talk about computers here. Apparently, there is a bogus version of Chrome for Android floating around the net. And this comes hard on the heels of a few weeks ago, Chrome was discovered to contain a dangerous vulnerability that made phishing attacks almost impossible to detect. So now there's a new threat. There's a malicious version of Google Chrome for Android floating around, and it contains a piece of malware, and it's been dubbed Andre Sandrat C, that can evade the digital signatures at the heart of modern security procedures. In other words, it can get around the security protocols. And the fraudulent Chrome can bypass the safeguards built into your device. It can record audio or video from your smartphone, read the contents of your SMS messages, record the location of the device. Nasty stuff out there, and again, we're all just wide open victims to be plundered by cybercrime, and the government seems to be okay with it. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Rick in Milwaukee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I have just started listening to your show, so I'm a new caller. I heard one of your previous callers mention Sheriff David Clark as a possible replacement for James Comey as FBI director.
Yes.
And I live in Milwaukee, and I want to tell you a little bit about him. I'm desperate to get rid of the man, okay? But I don't want him as FBI director. He's had 4 jail inmates die in just the last year. The last inmate that died under his watch, he's in charge of the jail here. The last inmate that died of the 4 died because of dehydration, because his deputies turned off the water for a week. So this man, this mentally unbalanced man,
we reported on that. We reported on that, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm calling to tell your listeners that anybody but him, okay? Trey Gowdy as FBI director, fine. Judge Andrew Napolitano, fine, love him. Sheriff David Clark he's done here. He's done here politically. I don't know what Trump is going to do with him. We don't want him for FBI director. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm in agreement. I would love to see Trey Gowdy take over the FBI. I want to see Judge Napolitano on the Supreme Court. That's what I want to see.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Rick. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to computers. Apparently, on the upcoming Windows 10S edition, it will be impossible to install Google Chrome. And people are wondering, is this really about security because of the recent embarrassments? Or is it simply Microsoft deciding to enforce that you will use their browser on their operating system on what is effectively their computer under the end-user license agreement? They're getting more and more aggressive and tyrannical. I remember living in an age where the philosophy in business, and especially retail, was the customer's always right. You're there to make the customer happy, and then a happy customer will give you their money. Seem to have lost that little bit of common sense. Give me your money, this is what you get for it. I don't have a lot of time to play with it, but I'm enjoying that Raspberry Pi. We have been talking about data throttling. We're talking about it in the context of the difficulties we were having with our internet connection last week at Spectrum, which apparently the problems are still there, but we're able to work around them. And Spectrum's official policy is they do not throttle. Then we found a document on Spectrum's own website that said as part of network management, they would enforce bandwidth limiting, which sounds like throttling, but they figure since they're not actually using that word, they can say, we're not throttling. Well, apparently AT&T has been caught throttling their unlimited data connections, where they're advertising unlimited data, you are paying for unlimited data, but they are slowing it down. And apparently AT&T is now looking at potential legal action over that, because the customer's not getting what they pay for. And we should not allow ourselves to be convinced that it's okay to be buying 300 megabits per second download and 30 should be okay and we should be happy with that. That's a bad state of mind to be in. Now, it looks like what's going on is in this age of acquisitions and mergers and building a monopoly of internet service providers, that the need for cash is so great that they're not keeping up to date with their actual infrastructure. The infrastructure is oversubscribed. People are coming into the country or being born into the country or becoming old enough. They're getting smart devices, smartphones, tablets, and so forth. They're logging onto these ISPs, and there's simply too much traffic. And they're not spending the money to increase their capacity because the money is going toward acquiring other companies and building these empires. And, of course, once you have a monopoly, you're stuck, because you will pay what the monopoly demands that you pay, and you will accept whatever service the monopoly gives you. And that's why there used to be laws against these large monopolies, because it was understood the more competition you have, the better it is for consumers, because companies will have an incentive to keep prices low and quality of service high. And that, too, is a wisdom that seems to have faded away in the fascist states of America. Now, we have been talking about schools spying on their students. And we had a caller in the other day who was outraged over this student who got expelled for 10 days for liking an Instagram picture of an airsoft rifle. And a part of the story I hadn't heard was that apparently this student did this in his own home. And somehow the school found out about it. And the caller said, well, obviously the schools are working with the three-letter agencies. And I came back and said, they don't need to, because a lot of schools are using their own software to spy on their own students. And we have a story about that as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsor. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about schools spying on their students in their home over the computers, and how they don't need to go to the three-letter agencies to do it. We all know that story that came out a couple of years ago about how this school district was issuing school-owned laptops to their students to do their work on, and the laptops had software that allowed school administrators to spy on the children in their own rooms, in their own homes, at all hours of the day and night. And was a big stink there. And now there's another one, story that's coming on out about how over in Putnam County, Tennessee, where they're using a very aggressive malware in their student laptops that not only spies on the students in the home, but can actually go on out and infect the network in the home itself. I mean, why do they need that? First of all, my attitude is when a student leaves the school campus, that is the end of the school's authority. And for them to be spying on the kids at home to make sure they're being politically correct, like the case of the guy who liked an Instagram gun picture of an airsoft gun, rather. That's ridiculous. And now we have the schools are actually hacking the home computers of the students. That is so far over the top. It's ridiculous. It's gone completely out of control. Now then, another story. This is out of Tech Republic. A study finds that cybersecurity professionals, meaning the people who are hired to protect the IT infrastructure of corporations, are hiding breaches, bypassing protocols, and they're paying ransom. And so cybersecurity company Bromium has found an average of 10% of security professionals have quietly paid ransomware demands, and 35% have admitted to circumventing or disabling or otherwise bypassing their own organization's security. And that's always the weakest point in any secure setup, the human being who is in charge of it. All right, let's grab a phone call. Fred in Madison, Wisconsin, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm just reviewing what this guy from Milwaukee just called in and said. He's using your platform to spread a bunch of lies. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. It's the capital of Wisconsin. They have the hammer and sickle flying over this place. Milwaukee is like Chicago. It's an old city. Clark came out. He's a law and order guy. They don't like him because he's black. They don't like the fact that he has conservative views. And there's organizations in this part of the world that would do everything to bring this guy down. And basically, as far as the comparison here, which is real easy to make, he was the one that came out, Clark came out and said, protect yourself in Milwaukee. Get yourself a gun.
I remember that.
Okay? Now, this is a guy that, he comes right out and says, we can't be everywhere. We can't protect you. It could take us 30 minutes to show up. If he hadn't stepped up and made these comments and made people wake up, it would look like the shooting gallery, which is Chicago, Illinois, every weekend. So he's running for, it looks to me like he's running for senator to get rid of Tammy Baldwin, who's a leftist commie that snuck in here in the last election cycle. And I hope and pray that there's people out there that have some common sense. I thought it was fair. I had to be fair about this, because what this guy said was all up in the air, and that's just the way it is in Milwaukee.
Well,
thank you for your time.
Thank you. The one part that was missing, he was talking about the prisoners who had died at the hands of the guards. but he didn't actually provide any kind of a link that Sheriff Clark either knew it, condoned it, or ordered it. And again, we all know, based on the Stanford prison experiment, the psychology of guards and prisoners can get really ugly really quickly, and that's unfortunately a part of what incarceration does bring about. Okay, we're coming up here on yet another commercial break. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently the fact that Donald Trump was able to win the White House without being a career politician has inspired a whole new generation of potential candidates for 2020. And according to Mark Zuckerberg, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Katy Perry, and Oprah Winfrey are all seriously thinking of launching campaigns for 2020. And if that doesn't tell you the presidency is just a figurehead for the real power in this country, nothing will. I remember the big stink when Reagan ran for president. They were saying, oh, he's just this failed movie star. Well, he'd been governor of California. But it is almost making a satire, a joke, a parody of our political system. All right, let's take some more phone calls. Chuck in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you're absolutely the best. Got two issues that I want to bring up with you today.
Okay.
Down here in Texas, as you're aware, they passed a law against sanctuary cities, kind of strip them of money. And I called in to one of the mainstream media, quote, conservative talk shows, and they were talking about it, and I pointed out that all we have to do is arrest the people hiring them. Title VIII. Yes. And explained it to them very, very shortly, very quickly, very succinctly, and said, thank you for your time, hung up, and I started a firestorm. People were calling in, a lot of other contractors, as I am, calling in saying, I know 100 guys I could rat out for hiring nothing but illegals. And it just started a firestorm. So I wanted the listeners to consider listening to your mainstream media on their AM channels, because they'll talk about, oh, let's arrest all the illegals. No, arrest people hiring them as well. When you arrest an illegal, arrest the guy who hired him, and watch what happens whenever you do that. It absolutely started a firestorm.
Well, you're absolutely right here, because anybody who is employing an illegal immigrant is in violation of Title VIII. Anybody who was sheltering them or transporting them or helping them evade the immigration authorities, that's punishable by a jail sentence under Title VIII. Yeah, if we start enforcing the Title VIII laws, the immigration problem is going to go away.
Well, I quote you very, very often saying that illegal is not a race. On my advertising, it says English only spoken here. And if you don't like that, well, don't hire me. But item two, and this one may take a little bit of time, that maybe we may need to take in a show where we have more time, was the CON, the Convention of States.
Yes.
You and I may disagree on that, my friend. I've always been against the CON simply because, number one, if they won't follow the Constitution we have today, why would they follow a new one? And the American public is beyond ignorant. They're stupid and can be manipulated into giving away the basic rights we have under this Constitution. I am so afraid of a CON because we could turn into the USSR overnight, because Americans they're not just ignorant, they're stupid. And I'm afraid of a CON. And I heard you, a week ago, saying that you thought it was a good idea. Please enlighten me where I'm wrong on this.
Well, no, there is a risk that a CON could go against us, but if we had a constitutional convention in which the states' rights wrote a new constitution guaranteeing the states' rights and decentralized power from the federal government, then we wouldn't have to worry about the federal government ignoring the new constitution because their teeth would have been pulled in the legalistic sense. I'll admit it's a risk, But on the other hand, I'm still trying to find a peaceful way that we can change the course of this nation without either a civil war, a revolution, or a world war. And maybe I'm grasping at straws at this point. And maybe a con really is not the way to go. But I'm rapidly running out of ideas. I don't want to see a bloody revolution in this country. I don't want to see a bloody civil war. And we're already at a stage right now where violence is already on the rise all across the country for various and sundry reasons. Everybody's at the flashpoint. And maybe a con offers a way out, or maybe it would take us in a bad direction so rapidly that everybody would get angry and there would be a revolution. But I'm running out of ideas. I'm running out of ideas that I think could actually work.
That's a good point. About 2 years ago, I said, well, let's just quit messing around. Let's go ahead and let them have their way to the point where people will wake up. Sometimes you have to. I have an old saying when I was a political activist. You cannot have a conversation with a sleeping man. But if you walk up and kick him in a kidney, now you can have a conversation.
It's a different management style than I would resort to be very honest. But the first thing you have to do is you have to shatter the beliefs that are imprisoning the other person you're talking to. And these days, the fastest way to do that is always go back to the lies about Saddam's nuclear weapons. So when somebody's out there saying, well, Kim Jong-un is a crazy man here. Oh, have you ever met him? No, but I saw it on TV, and I'll say, is that the same TV that told you Saddam had nuclear weapons? And you can just see the light go on in the eyes. So it's a very, very potent meme to keep in mind.
Michael, I think you are absolutely the best.
Thank you.
RBN, when you're here, whenever you were on
that other place.
Don't just platform, that other place. I have followed you all over for years.
Well,
and
thank you.
I appreciate so much what you do. And I'm, by the way, real big to help you get back to continental United States. So I'm going to hunt up what that fellow started.
It's been shut down. It's been shut down. We shut it down. First of all, he started it without consulting with me, which was a tacky no-no. And second, I'm living on the donations to whatreallyhappened.com right now, which are barely getting us by. On top of that, we're asking everybody to support RBN during their May fundraising drive because they're on the verge of not being able to make it anymore. And I felt putting a third bag on top of that was simply inappropriate. And so I asked him to shut it down, and he's refunding all the money that was donated to it back to the original donors. And I said, please do, and this goes to everybody, do not take any unilateral steps about fundraising without talking first to me or to RBN, because you can really cause a lot of complications we really don't need right now.
Very good. Very good. I've donated a lot to RBN over the last few years, and I'd like to keep you guys on air.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure they appreciate all the help that you can send on in because, again, we're literally in a war between the corporate media and the independent media, and they're playing dirty. They're going after our computers. They're trying to find some way they can shut us down despite the First Amendment. They're just out there with smear jobs, fake news. They're trying to plant nonsense stories to make us look ridiculous, or even worse, open us up to lawfare, litigation. They're going after our advertisers and threatening our advertisers. So it's a very, very ugly time in American history.
Well, maybe I'll start another silver drive. Maybe prime the pump with some silver for everybody to pitch in and send in silver. If they're not able to send in any cash, I'll some silver buried in the backyard. We go out there and dig some up. I've done this before. And maybe we'll try that again.
Okay.
Mike, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Let's get back to the rest of the guys.
All right. And again, the information to donate to RBN is on the front page of republicbroadcasting.org. And there is a postal address in Round Rock, Texas, that you can use to send in cash, checks, silver, old empties, old 78 records, whatever it is you're going to send on in. Okay. Boy, the lines are filling up here. Ken in Fort Worth, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. Hey, Reagan was a Baraxel salesman, right? Anyway, hey, do you have any 912 projects of meetings in your area?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Because we have one in Fort Worth over here for the last 2-3 years, like on one night a month, and we all get together and we talk about candidates and voter fraud and electric meters. We talk about everything. It's not a Democrat, Republican thing, but it's active. And you learn a lot. You talk to meet people who are like-minded, meet candidates. I just wonder if you did it over in your area, or why they don't.
Well, I'm not aware whether they are or not. If they are, they haven't contacted me, and I haven't gone looking for them. Basically, Claire and I tend to sit close to home because of the fragility of our car. And in fact, if we have to do a long trip, we'll actually get a rental for the day. We're that close to the end on the old Honda there. But hopefully, Claire and I are going to find a way to get back to the mainland, and at that point, it's going to be easier for me to go on out and start meeting all the listeners and talking to them and going to these various symposiums and conventions and talk about the course this nation is on.
Hey, there's plenty of room down here in Texas. Come on over.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Poot
Thanks, you guys.
in North Carolina. Aloha, Poot. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I know you're a genius about remembering stuff, and there's a story that's bouncing around in my mind that I wish you would help me flesh out about Comey, Loretta Lynch, and the HSBC Bank and the money laundering.
Yes. We put it up a couple of times. We even made a graphic out of it, and we talked about it earlier in the show. HSBC was caught laundering massive amounts of drug money at a time when James Comey was on the board of directors, and he would have had to have known what was going on. And because drug money lies at the heart of the Clinton-Bush duocracy, going on back to that CIA operation out of Arkansas in the mid-1980s, that seems to be the tie that binds. Yeah, well, Mina was one of the airports, but it actually used a lot of different airfields and a lot of different areas. There was the train death situation, and of course, Bill Clinton was running his part of the operation out of Little Rock. His job was to set up the money laundry and also to make sure the state drug authorities stayed away from certain parts of the state.
All right, my brother, would you make another link to that story? I know you did so much, but kind of refresh it for me, because I was talking with my neighbor, and I'd like to link that to him.
All right, I'll hunt that down, and I'll put it up on whatreallyhappened.com after the radio show today.
You're the man. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you. I recall... and I know all of us have experienced this. Your caller was just talking about it a couple of calls ago, where you're trying to talk to people who, they're conservatives or conservatards, patriotards. They consider themselves right-wingers or whatever. And maybe their intentions are good, but they're just ignorant and closed-minded people. But, I had become associated with this quote-unquote militia group back in 2009 that was forming, and it became obvious to me that they were just against Obama for whatever reason, and I'm trying to tell them, well, this started long before any of us had ever heard of Obama. And anyway, I tried to educate them about 9/11. Some of them already knew about it, but they told me, don't talk about 9/11. It hurts the other guy's feelings because they want to believe the official story. And I said, well, now all of these guys, none of them trust the media, right? They all these, conservatives that haven't woken up, the Rush Limbaugh listeners, all that, they love to talk about, oh, you can't trust the media lies. But have you ever noticed they will buy the media, the mainstream lying media. They will buy the stories that they want to believe, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I've seen that before. Listen, you need to be very careful, and this is for all the listeners. Be very careful about joining up with any kind of a militia group or anybody talking about violence or any of that nonsense, because half the time these militias are actually being organized by undercover FBI informants in order to try and locate potential troublemakers. And there have been a lot of cases where these various militias, the people who are leading them, are outed as FBI informants. Do you remember Elohim City, which figured prominently with the Oklahoma City bombing, and it came out during one of the court trials of one of the peripheral people that the guy who had founded and was running Elohim City was an FBI informant. So you need to be really, really careful about that, because if you join one of these militias or groups and they say, let's go on out and do something, you could be the next patsy being set on up for a spectacular headline arrest.
Not only that, but they're looking, these agents and agencies are looking to justify their own jobs and their own agencies as well,
yes,
because basically they don't have a whole lot to do. So they have to go out and create problems and create patsies and provocateurs.
Well, they actually do have a lot to do, but it's a lot easier to go on out and fake a crime and an arrest to justify your budget increase than actually go on out and find the real criminals. And that's one of the reasons, for example, why cybercrime is just completely out of control in this country. It's too hard to track them down and do anything about it. So let's just find a patsy and set him up as a phony terrorist, and all will be well.
Yeah, well, I don't get along too well with people. So after the group, got bigger than 6-8 people, I was out of it anyway. I'm like, I'm too independent. Too independently minded. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a loner, and I don't do any violence. All I do is run my big mouth. That's what I always tell them when they're listening to me on the telephone.
Okay. Well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to start with Frank in North Carolina, but I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. Frank, what's on your mind? Oh, that was Frank. I'm sorry. Okay, well, then the phone lines are... Close the lines for the rest of the show, because I want to get back to some stuff. One of the areas in which Donald Trump is keeping a campaign promise is the end of this human-caused global warming nonsense. Trump has apparently, through the new EPA director, purged the Environmental Protection Agency board of all the warmistas, the carbonazis, and brought in some people with a little bit more objective understanding about what's going on. And meanwhile, of course, here we are on May the 10th, and Wisconsin farmers are still having trouble starting their growing season because of snow. So contrary to Al Gore's fear-mongering about human-caused global warming, it does look like the decline in solar activity does herald a new Maunder minimum and a new mini ice age. And still the fear-mongering is out there. The latest one is from the Express in Great Britain that the melting polar ice could release these ancient viruses that have been sleeping in the ice for tens of thousands of years, to which we have no natural immunity and can cause a global pandemic. So that's the latest one. Pay carbon taxes or the germs are going to get you. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. We'll be right back for the last segment of our program. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the vaccine wackos are out there again. Apparently, there's been an outbreak of chicken pox at a California elementary school, about 1/4 of the students. And amazingly enough, the chicken pox is hitting the students who have been vaccinated against chicken pox. And so what does the school administration do? They order the unvaccinated children to go home until they get the vaccine. Meanwhile, down in Australia, parents who do not vaccinate their children will be fined $14 per week. You will stick this chemical in your kid. We don't care if it works or not. Another alarm is being sounded here that there's been a study showing that the pollution coming out of pharmaceutical plants contains very high levels of antibiotic and antifungal drug residue in water sources. This is leading to the evolution of new deadly superbugs, antibiotic-resistant new life forms. You can't just flood that stuff on out there. And as we're now seeing in farms that have been using the glyphosate Roundup, the life forms evolve to be tolerant. And that's what's happening here. Let's see. Over at Netflix, apparently they're beginning a purge of all videos that portray gender as a genetically determined absolute. Apparently, the new paradigm from the globalists is to convince you that gender is fluid, that you really aren't, there's no such thing as a pure man or a pure woman. You're somewhere in the middle, and it may take you a while to figure on out. It's trying to keep you confused about who and what you really are to make it easier to control you. And apparently, Microsoft was bragging about Office at a convention, and its online Office 365 service went down. And that gets to be a real problem. They're trying to get everybody onto the cloud, everybody onto centralized services. You no longer have files in memory or files in processing on your own computer. It's all remote. Your device is just a terminal now into the mainframes. And what happens when the mainframe goes down? Everything stops. Years ago in Hollywood, there used to be a company called Digital Productions. And they were famous, first of all, for the movie The Last Starfighter. And second, because they had invested in a Cray supercomputer, and it was impressive to look at. But because it programmed in Fortran, they had to rewrite a lot of code that was already in existence under C into Fortran. And everything went through that Cray. And when that Cray broke down, and it did a lot, everybody got to go home. And that's why today in the computer animation industry, they don't get big, giant computers. They just get racks and racks of little, tiny, inexpensive computers rendering farms so that if a machine dies, production goes on. Centralization has always been great for maximizing profitability, but terrible for reliability. There's the music. Time for Claire and I to get out of here and get something done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.